Welcome to Brain Strength. This series for this average fool teaches you a thing or two about sports psychology so that you can be the best you. I'm your host, RJ Lynch, and this episode of Brain Strength, we are going to be focusing on the psychology of competitive lifters. When I say competitive, I'm going to be focusing on more powerlifting and weightlifting, colloquially known as Olympic weightlifting, but it's just called weightlifting for those who know. Now, as I go through this, there's going to be a lot of lessons for those lifters in particular, but also a thing or two for those who are just more general lifters, people who just go out and lift things for fun, might be able to take away from this. Also, as I go through this, I do have them somewhat separate, but also together because there are some overlaps with things, but there is also some differences based on how the sport is structured and the athletes that compete in them. So first off, I'm going to start with the personality of powerlifters, or the things that I see are most common in powerlifters that are fairly successful. These observations come from me as a coach, coaching high schoolers in powerlifting, to some of the more collegiate powerlifters I've known and gotten to know over the years. Like I said before, a lot of these things will overlap with weightlifters, but here are things I see most prominently in the powerlifter. First off, they're going to be patient and persistent. In the sport, you're making usually very small gains once you get any good at it. So maybe that first year you PR by 50 pounds in your squat, and then it takes you another 5 years to PR by 5 pounds. It's a sport where little increments, day-by-day improvements is what gets you there, and it's very hard a lot of times to see the changes, see the benefits, the growth as you go through. So what happens when you're very successful at powerlifting is you're very patient with it. You're very persistent. You know you're going to have your highs and your lows, and you keep going forward with them. Next up, when I see some of the best powerlifters, I see them have a little bit of analytical thinking going on. So not only are they very cautious and thinking about what they're going to be doing for their weights, for what's my opener going to be, where do I want to be, what do I have to hit at this meet to qualify for this meet. They're very analytical there. But then once they're in competition, they're playing a little bit of that mind game of, okay, I need to hit this to hit my PR, to get my best, to go compete and be the best me. But I'm also going to watch out like, do I want to make a 5 or 10 pound jump here? They might look over to the person who's in front of them, seeing them up a little bit, and they're like, okay, I'm going to jump up 10 so I can get in front of that person. So they're playing this little bit of a mind game. They're really thinking of, do I need to be jumping there? Should I be jumping here? What do I need to be doing? Next up, they're often very self-reliant. Powerlifting is one of those sports where sometimes it's just you on a team. You might be the only person, maybe you have a coach. So you have to be very self-motivated. You're pushing yourself. You're the one doing your squat, bench, deadlift every so many days, doing it all the time. And you have to be dependent on you because you're the one that's tracking you and you're the only one that's accountable for you. Even when you're on a team of 30, 40 kids, you're the only one that really controls am I in my weight class? Am I hitting my weights? Am I taking things easy day? What does that look like? But at the same time, when these powerlifters get to events, when they get to meets, it becomes very community oriented. Because you do so many things on your own, because you're alone so often, when it gets to the competition, you're like, oh, I'm not the only 242 today. I have 4 other people with me. I'm going to hang out with them, talk with them, have fun, and make it more enjoyable instead of just me sitting there brooding all by myself alone again. So those are some of the common things I'll see with powerlifters. Not to say that all those things don't apply for weightlifters, but I think those are the things that stand out most to me when I watch powerlifters. The things that I see stand out the most when I'm with Olympic weightlifters or weightlifters is they tend to be a little bit more coachable than powerlifters because squat, bench, deadlift are simpler lifts. They tend to be a little bit more boneheaded at times. Sorry to my athletes, you're a little bit more boneheaded. But because it's so simple, they don't always take coaching feedback as well. The good ones do, overall in general, not as much as weightlifters who are working with a clean and jerk or a snatch that are very technical, very time-oriented, very skill-based. These things have to be so precise, they're more likely to take coaching, to take video, to do things like that so they can get better and learn. Because just a small fraction might make the difference. Whereas someone can just bonehead and bro out a deadlift and get the weight, just trying to bro out on a clean and jerk is probably just going to get you killed. Next up, their patience extends a little bit more. So while they're patient in waiting for their PRs, going through all the chaos and the hell to get to where they need to be, they're also patient when they're lifting. So in the clean and jerk and snatch, it's a very time-based thing. Like you need to make that first, second, and third pull all at the right time in the correct orientation, in the correct manner. So they're very patient. All right, I'm pulling. All right, now I get the snap. Or here, get under, pull myself under, whatever it is. They're very patient in the lift, not just throughout the year. I tend to see a little bit more focus. Once again, powerlifter can sometimes just bro their way through and kind of ditz around a bit at some of their weights, whereas a weightlifter, because things are so technical, they have to be very focused on making every rep count so that they can be the best them. Then lastly, one of the things I see is because Olympic weightlifting is so much more explosive, because there's so much more and things like that where things are quick, I tend to see a lot more energy. There's a little bit more like up. Whereas some people in games and competitions need to be very even-keeled. They need to be very mellow. They have to be like here to perform their best. Think quarterback, golfer, somebody that has to be very here. Olympic weightlifters tend to be a little bit more excitable, more like sprinters where they're a little bit more jivey, got a little bit more energy, dancing a little bit more because they need to be up. Their CNS needs to be firing. They have to be ready to go and do something explosive. Some powerlifters are this way. Some are really fun, dancing all the time. But I just see it once again more with weightlifters. All right, now that we understand their personalities a little bit more, let's take a look at some of the common issues that I see that kind of transcend both sports and a little bit into just normal everyday weightlifting. So the common issues tend to be there's a bit of a fear of the spotlight, fear of injury, very perfection-oriented, suffering from perfectionism. They have what I like to call valley motivations. And then they have weight class stresses. So they're always worried about making sure they're in the right weight classes. So starting off, number one, that fear of the spotlight. Depending on the competition, a lot of times the person lifting might be the only one doing anything. Everybody else is just watching them. They have their 3 judges across the board. They have 100 people in the stands, more or less, whatever it is, and all eyeballs are on them. If you're at a high school meet, maybe there's 4 racks going at once or so, but most of the time it's very few people doing anything and just you, so everybody can watch you. And because they're so worried about everybody watching them, they start getting into that overthinking standpoint, like, oh my God, I'm performing in front of a large crowd. I gotta make sure the things are done right. I'm very tense. I threw up a little bit before. I'm sweating a lot. And then at the very least, sometimes they just give up before they even do their lift because they're so afraid of failing in front of this crowd or embarrassing themselves in front of people. They might get up to the bar, feel it, and then just like, nope, not doing it. Those are a lot of the symptoms you'll see if someone is suffering from fear of the spotlight. So what do I do as a mental performance consultant to help these athletes? First thing a lot of times I'll have them do is create a pre-performance routine. And this routine can be something they do at practice and at competitions. And basically it's just a set of things, whether it's how they walk up to the bar, how they set their feet, whatever it is, just to remind themselves that what I'm about to do here is the same thing I've done 3,000 times before at practice. Next up, I like to do mindfulness and breath work. A lot of our fears and worry about failing in front of a crowd comes from the anxiety that we have that, oh, this is going to happen if I do this, that. Your mind starts to run in these circles of negative thinking. And what mindfulness and breath training does is it stops that negative train from going any farther and just recenters you here and says, why am I worried about what happens if I fail to lift? I haven't even done it yet. And it just gets you in that mindset. So it's like, I'm just going to do it, and whatever happens, happens. And then finally, we'll do like imagery and simulations of a big moment. So if I just have my one athlete that's going to state, and we're getting prepared of the idea of having all these people around them, all these things going on, what I'm going to have them do is I'm going to have them practice in front of the team, and I'm just going to have the whole team watch them for a day, cheer them on, be the crowd, just staring, maybe silent, all these things so they can have that little bit of feeling of like, oh, this is what it's like when 100 pair of eyes is on me. It just helps build that memory of like, okay, this isn't anything new. I can do this. It's just a different stage, different place, different location. Next up is the fear of injury. Heavy weights hurt. heavy weights hurt when they're done right, and they hurt when they're done wrong even more. So a lot of times athletes will become scared of doing certain things because they're fearing hurting themselves or hurting themselves again. What this looks like is a lot of times they'll avoid certain lifts in practice, they'll make excuses on certain training days. So for whatever reason, they're healthy every day for deadlift, but on squat days, that knee just suddenly bothers them no matter what they do for their warm-up. Very strange. They might be applying frequent restrictions, despite the fact that maybe they've talked with athletic trainers or physical therapists, like, you can do everything. The athlete's still putting these mental restraints, like, well, the AT says I can do this, but I don't know if I feel comfortable. I still kind of feel off when I'm doing it. So they're putting these mental restrictions instead of what are actual physical restrictions. As an MPC, what I do to help is imagery again. I have them practice going through lifting this heavy thing, doing it correctly and seeing themselves do it without getting hurt. We use mindfulness once again to stop our mind from thinking about things that haven't happened before, or stop it from thinking about things that have happened but aren't currently happening. And then lastly, we do some gradual exposure. If you're really worried about squats, I can't get you over the fact that you can do this weight. I'm going to start with, okay, you don't do back squats for me, will you do a goblet squat very light? Okay, you do a goblet squat very light. Let's do this light. Let's do the bar. Let's add only 10% of the 80% you're supposed to be doing. And let's just build from there. Every rep, every set, trying to get a little bit better, reminding you that you can get through this. You're going to be fine. Next up, something I see a little bit more from weightlifters compared to powerlifters, but in both overall, is this idea that you have to do everything perfect. They have this belief that they have to do everything just perfectly. There can't be any twinge. There can't be any improper position. If things start wrong, I just got to bail out and stop it. And what they do is they throw up this barrier in their wall of the fact that when you're lifting your max weights, things are not going to be perfect. If you watch the best deadlifters in the world, yes, when they start lighter, their form is immaculate. It is perfect. When they get up to heavier weights, when they're getting to their max, it's still better than about 99% of people, but it doesn't quite look the same. Maybe their back's just rounded a little bit more, or they're not as tall as they get in there. They're not pushing through the ground the same way, whatever it is. The reason they're able to do that is they're like, this is normal enough. In weightlifting, powerlifting, there is perfect, which is unattainable. You're never going to have perfect everything. And then there's good, as in, you're doing this well. You're probably not going to get hurt. And then there's perfect enough. Perfect enough is that middle ground between it's good and perfect. And then there's bad, horrible, don't do it or you're going to hurt yourself. Imperfect enough, trying to find that realm, it's being like, all right, I know what perfect form looks like. I can do it somewhat, but I recognize that all of a sudden, if I am lifting a max weight, things might shift slightly. And I have to be okay with, I'm in a spot where that shift is not going to cause me any harm. And I'm okay with that. And I'm going to get up, look at the video. Coaches go look at me like, I'm going to say, like, I got it up. Now we know what this new max is. We're going to train again so that next time we do that, it doesn't look like that. So someone who is currently dealing with perfectionism, though, and hasn't found that perfect enough zone is usually doing some extremely drawn out rituals. They're like, okay, everything I do has to be perfect. So my walk up has to be there. My approach to the bar has to be exact. I have to twist my foot exactly 3 times every time. I'm very particular about that versus a routine that might be like, I walk up, I twist feet, I set myself, I breathe, and I go. A ritual is like, I walk up, I take 10 steps, I shift my foot 3 times, I take 2 deep breaths. I'm doing all this thing in this exact order. It's a ritual that it has to be that. Otherwise, oops, did I take 1 or 2 breaths? Okay, I better back out and take my 2 breaths again. Or the second they start doing the lift, there feels a little bit of offness, and they're like, I give up, I'm done. So what would I do as an MPC to help? The first thing I do is imagining pushing themselves through a little bit of the badness, having them all of a sudden they're rushed on the clock so they can't go through their full ritual and still doing the lift successfully. Or maybe they see themselves in that perfect enough zone versus being perfect. So I have them go through a deadlift, their back rounds a little bit as they go, but then they're able to pull themselves back and stay up instead of feeling that pull forward and just dropping the weight. Place themselves in discomfort. So whether it's in practice or in their imagery, have them do things that are a little uncomfortable so they get to experience what it's like to not be perfect and still succeed. Next up, once again, is mindfulness, new routines, things we've talked about. And then finally, challenging of beliefs. I'm going to have them think back to the times where they've done things perfectly and times they've done things not so perfectly and be like, have you been successful when you're not perfect? Most of the time people are like, yeah, but what? You were successful, right? Right? Yep. Okay. Let's focus on that. Don't worry about that butt. I don't care about your butt. I'm not worried about your butt right now. I just want to focus on the fact that you were successful at that moment and you can do so again. Next up, I see a lot of what I like to call valley motivation because of mountains and valleys. And it's the idea that because these sports are so focused on small progressions, you can find yourself very easy in this valley where you're kind of like, man, am I good at this sport? This sucks. I've been stuck at this weight for like months, for years. Am I going to get better? And they can just find themselves with lacking motivation. It's not very easy to get themselves going. A lot of times this can look like they're angry even on good days. So maybe they're hitting good weights in there, but it's not as much as they want. Or they're pushing too hard in practice. So they say, all right, I need you to be training at +3 today. And they get to their +3, but it's like, I was supposed to do 10 more pounds. Screw this. I am putting that 10 more pounds on. And all of a sudden they're doing a +1 for the repage. And it's like, and now you're hurt. Or they just go completely off script because they're so tired of being stuck at a certain weight. They're like, well, I'm just going to max out today. Sure, I'm supposed to be doing 4 sets of 12, but I'm just going to do 3 sets of 1 and max out. And it's like, sweet brother in mercy, just do what you're told and it's going to help you more. What I do as an MPC to help these individuals is first we review our goals saying, what are we trying to do? When are we trying to do it? I don't need you to be hitting your PR in December if your competition's not till February. I do what's called a society scorecard. Basically, it's a review of, do you care about this PR because you care about it or because people tell you you're supposed to care about it because your friends are hitting those numbers so you think you have to compete with them. Then we're going to do things like self-talk and why examinations. Examining the words you're saying to yourself. Are you saying things that are hurting you? Are you doing things that align with the why you're in the sport? The last issue is weight class stress. In weightlifting and powerlifting, there's weight classes. These athletes tend to become very focused in the idea of being in a certain weight class. They're always talking about how much they weigh. They're always talking about how much food they're having, their diet they're on. Maybe they're becoming lethargic because they're trying to cut weight and they're like, oh, not eating anything, even though they're in the hardest part of training. They're frustrated. They're stalled out because they're underfed. Maybe they're lethargic because they're overeating because they're trying to hit this certain weight class, so they're too stuffed, like, my belly is full, and it does not help them. As an MPC, sometimes I have to refer them out to people who are psychologists so they can talk about it because maybe they have an eating disorder. Maybe I'm just working with them on talk therapies of, once again, their goal setting, their whys of, does this matter? Can we have you thinking about just the amount that you're lifting, and then whatever you're lifting in that weight class is going to be great. That's all you need to worry about. That might be education and reviewing social support. Do you understand why we eat? Why it's good to have food in your body when you're doing high rep stuff? Do you understand that I need you full when you're doing max repetitions? Are we looking at the people that are around you? Are your coaches pushing this? Is your family pushing this? Are your friends pushing you? Are they doing things in the right way that care about your health or just how you perform? Your social support should always care about how you are as a human being before how you are as an athlete. Because human before athlete always. So we might have to talk about that and review that. So finally, what does a competitive weightlifter look like? They're resilient and gritty. There are going to be tough days. There's going to be failures. There's going to be more failures than successes. Can you get up and keep going? You're focused on a goal. You know how much weight you need to make. what you have to lift and this and that. So you're focused on getting there, improving every day. You're going to be coachable. You'll be strategic about how you do things, knowing that what you do in December matters in March. And then you're going to be disciplined. There's going to be days where you're going to want to push it harder. There's going to be days where you're going to want to take it easy. And you're going to have to find that balance of doing what you need to do to be the best you. And until next time, if there's anything I said today that you found offensive, I hope you can forgive me. If there's anything you say in the comments that I find offensive, no, I'll forgive you. So we'll be seeing ya. Brain Strength, out.